Welcome to Apropos. She's rolling out a series of policy ideas this week aimed at helping small businesses. US Vice President Kamala Harris is set to propose expanding a tax break for startups during a speech in New Hampshire. Her rival, Donald Trump, is also using the week before their highly anticipated debate to sharpen his economic messaging about who will do more for the middle class. With the details, here's Monty Francis.
As a latecomer to the race, Kamala Harris has been rolling out her agenda piece by piece, focused on what she's branded the opportunity economy. Her latest proposal is to provide new small businesses with a tax credit of $50,000, expanding the current tax break by tenfold. The goal, says Harris, is to encourage entrepreneurship.
So I want to see 25 million new small business applications by the end of my first term. And to help achieve this, we will lower the cost of starting a new business.
Harris is also pledging to give money directly to U.S. consumers by permanently expanding the child tax credit, including a $6,000 break for parents with infants, and to give first-time home buyers a leg up by providing a government contribution of $25,000 toward a down payment. In addition, Harris has promised a federal ban on price gouging on everyday items, including groceries.
We will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals.
When it comes to housing, Harris has pledged to spur the construction of millions of new homes, largely through tax incentives. Her campaign is trying to draw a contrast on economic policy with Donald Trump, who wants to cut the corporate tax rate and extend tax breaks to the wealthy. Harris has not explicitly said how she would pay for many of her proposals, but has expressed support for President Biden's plan to raise taxes on large corporations and the rich, or those making more than $400,000 a year.
Well, for more on those policy pledges, we're joined now by Christine McDaniel. She's Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Centre at George Mason University. Thank you so much for being with us on the programme this evening, Christine. So firstly, observers have been suggesting that Kamala Harris, she tends to veer to the left, perhaps when compared with Joe Biden. Do you think voters will be convinced by what she has to say on the economy?
Well, they might be. It's election season, campaign season. Politicians, they mean well, but they lie about the economy. They lie about international trade, and they will throw different things around to try to get particular votes from particular groups. So, for instance, recently, former President Trump has suggested that he would not tax tips. Which was clearly a play for, 350,000 workers in Nevada's hospitality industry, right? Well, then shortly after that, Vice President Harris said that she would do that too. So not only is that, it's not a very sensible tax policy strategy, but it's just a sort of a shameless way to try to get particular votes. And then also we saw Harris talk about a $25,000 subsidy for new home buyers. Again, that sounds great, especially if you're sitting there thinking about buying your first home. But in reality, what that will do is it will drive up demand and it will drive up prices. So when you think through these policies, just simple economics, what the candidates say they want to do versus the actual effects of their policy proposals are often not similar.
Political electioneering. A poll last month, Christine, suggested that voters trust Republicans more when it comes to the economy. Why is that, and what can Democrats do about it?
Yeah, well, it's I don't know. I'm an economist, not a politician. But there is this rule of sort of this generalization that Democrats tend to be the tax and spend party. Republicans try to, reduce, trim down regulations and cut taxes and grow the economy that way. Now, over the past couple of terms, both parties have been very big spenders. And also, and then the last Republican administration we had, they cut taxes and raised spending. This administration, they've kept taxes low and increased spending even more. So both parties are big spenders. We didn't see the inflation under Trump that we see under the Biden-Harris administration. That's partly just a bit of timing, but it also reflects the Biden-Harris huge COVID spending that they continued, and then just a number of government, very expensive government programs. So, but that is an uphill battle that Democrats have. They are usually not seen as fiscally responsible, even though lately both parties have lacked that responsibility.
Now, you mentioned the tax on tipping earlier. Are there particular areas where Trump and Harris have similar policies when it comes to the economy? There are, of course, many where they differ vastly.
I think on international trade, they are pretty similar. They both parties agree that trade with China is a concern to the extent that China is a huge trading partner. They flout the global trading rules. Both parties seem to embrace tariffs, and the Biden-Harris team embrace subsidies as well. So I think, regardless of who wins in November, we'll see more tariffs. With Harris, it'll probably just be to maintain the tariffs and maybe increase them. With Trump, maintain the tariffs, increase them, but then also increase them maybe in a more sporadic fashion. Trump seems to use tariffs more as a negotiating tactic.
And Harris, she's also proposing expanding tax breaks for startups. We're due to hear about that a little bit later this evening. Where do the two candidates stand on income tax? Harris wants to raise corporate tax rates, whereas Trump actually lowered them.
Right. Well, that's a great topic, because in 2025, the tax cuts will be expiring. So we will have a very big discussion in Washington about tax policy in our very near future. I think this is largely a Congress. Congress will have a big role to play here. The president can veto or not. But remember, Trump reduced the corporate tax rate from down to 21%. Biden wanted to raise it back up to 28%. He could not get that through a Republican Congress. So it's not really clear that even though Harris says she wants to do that, if she really could do that. There's other, everyone's looking for ways that will pay for these continued, to keep the taxes lower. Some people are talking about a wealth tax. It's basically like an unrealized capital gains tax. That has a lot of problems. It might not even be constitutional. So a lot of people are trying to find ways to keep those taxes low. It's not clear they're going to. But it does seem though that both of them are going to have different favorites, right? So while Harris might have a particular favorite group or sector in the economy, Trump will have his, and they're clearly not the same. But yeah, the U.S. has a very big tax policy discussion coming up in the next 12 to 24 months.
And Christine, inflation, the cost of living, they're also big issues for voters, not just in the United States, but elsewhere. US inflation is currently at about 3%. That is higher than it was when Trump left the White House. So how is all of that going to play out in this campaign?
Yeah, so we have the American shopper is facing high prices, and even though the inflation rate is coming down, prices are still just much higher than they were a year or two ago. When I walk into the grocery store, there's just staples that I always buy, and so those prices are ingrained in my mind, and they are still much higher than I'm used to, and my wages have not risen that much. And so that is, that's what Americans are feeling. And it's and so while Harris can say that she wants to, try to address greedy corporations, but I think most voters can see past that. Inflation is not necessarily driven by greedy grocery stores, but just a number of excessive fiscal expansionary spending policies. that the U.S. has had and kept in place. The Fed has clearly, waited probably longer than they should have to raise interest rates. And Congress and the White House kept spending much more money than they needed to on COVID. All that added up to higher prices. And then it just stayed there. And then it seeped into not only goods, but through services. People are not comfortable with that. And so all these extra fringe policies and key factors that people like to talk about, it's fine. But at the end of the day, people tend to think about when they walk into that ballot box, are they better off today than they were 4 years ago? And I think that's what most people will be thinking about.
Christine, thank you so much for joining us on the programme. That is Christine McDaniel, Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Centre at George Mason University. Well, that is it from us for now. Do stay with us, though. We'll be back shortly with more world news.